Well, hello, back for more animation. Animation. The nice thing about doing this as opposed to the daily sketching is that, the nice thing about it, I don't know, maybe it's not such a nice thing. The nice thing about, the daily sketching is fun because I don't know what I'm going to do when I do it. The animation thing is different because we know what we're doing. We can see what we're doing. So the daily animation is a little different. I guess the difference with this, though, that I can see I'm going to enjoy, I'm already enjoying, is that the scene will get done quicker because having to work on it daily just obviously is going to get me closer to the finished thing sooner, and that's important. Clearly important because obviously we want to get through to the end. And if I just worked on it only on the weekends, well, obviously it'll take a lot longer to get the scene done. And I just as soon get into the more final versions of this as soon as possible, really. So there you go. Let's see. I'm tracing in this line because I can see it's missing. As he comes over into this final position. So I want to make sure that's consistent. Maybe even in here. So let's see. Yeah, that line in there. It's just a little thing. Animation is. I love animation for, in some ways, the complexities of everything about it. The fact that you're trying to follow through on every little thing you're seeing to keep it, flowing and having it looking natural. So yeah, there's just so much to it. So at this point now, we've got, and let's pull it out once again and look at it constructively as a total scene. Play it. So, yeah, he's thinking, he looks, and he reacts. Thinks. Yeah. And it's at this point, see, once you have all the drawings that we've got now, even though there's still in-betweens that are missing to smooth things out completely, we what we're looking at here would be, I would say, would be considered, you know, 90% of the scene. Minus some, because you can always flood in betweens and get things to be very smooth. But once you have this much information, um, some would even say, well, that's animated. That's enough by itself. And in some situations, if you're doing animation where you're trying to save money and you don't mind holding things on fours and fives and sixes and whatever, you could call it animation because, you could decide that that's how much animation you want to do. And there have been productions where that's been the case. Um, Obviously, when you think of Disney animation, you think of a much smoother, more fluid kind of movement with a lot more drawing. So the more drawings you do, obviously, the smoother the action's going to be. But the intensity of what you're trying to do in the animation is probably not going to be that much different. Um, because the animation, it isn't necessarily about um, um, just drawing one drawing after the next. Richard Williams said it quite well. It's how one drawing dovetails into another, how far apart it is, and how you time it. He once said that's the skill. I remember the very first time I heard him say that, I thought, wow, boy, that's a beautiful way of describing animation. And hand drawn character animation, that is, which is what he was talking about. And that's the skill that we animators work diligently to develop. And we learn from the masters, the people that came ahead of us, the great animators at Disney's, Warner Brothers, so on and so forth. And of course, today we have a lot of new young animators who, when I say young animators, those of us of my generation who are now considered to be the old guard. We were once young animators working underneath the masters ahead of us. You know, the great masters, of course, that came ahead of us. Disney, of course, the Nine Old Men. Frank Thomas, Milt Kahl, Ollie Johnston, Mark Davis, Ward Kimball, Willie Reitherman, Les Clark, Eric. Did I miss Eric Larson? Who else am I missing? I said Milt Kahl, didn't I? I think I did. Yeah. Okay, if I missed anybody, sorry. Warner Brothers were Ken Harris, Ben Washam, Jerry Shinneke, of course, the great directors. Some of them were even animators. Chuck Jones, um, uh, Fritz Freeling, Arthur Davis. I got to be missing somebody over there. Great animators, and of course, the Fleischers. A lot of great animators there. Oh gosh, I can't think of all the names of some of the great David Tendler. A lot of great Fleischer animators. Um, then let's see. See, I'm trying to go back in time now to and even the UPA, some of the great animators, but a lot of those were ex-Disney guys. At Hanna-Barbera, even a lot of those folks came from Disney or MGM, Irv Spence. Oh gosh, so many. I would not want to leave out any of the greats, but a lot of these people that I just named were folks that I either met or worked with when I first came out here when I was in my 20s. And of course, I worked alongside a lot of the young animators at Disney, which I consider myself to be one of many. Glenn Keane, Randy Cartwright, Don Bluth, John Pomeroy, Tony Bancroft. So many of it. Andreas Deja, I remember when he first came out, and he and I became friends. There's just lots and lots of it. Mike Cedino, Matt O'Callahan. There's just many, many great animators. Joe Ranf. Dan Haskett, Lou Scarborough. Oh man, who am I missing? Bob McKnight. So many. I don't want to. Heidi Goodell. Linda Miller. I always hate to name people because it's like there's so many, and I don't want anybody that would hear this to think, "Oh, you left me out." Yeah, I love all of you. Okay, so please don't get mad at me if I left out somebody. I meant to include you. The list is extremely long. Hindel Butoy, so many. Who are now John Lasseter? Some of these are folks that I worked right alongside of or knew personally. And of course now we're the old guard, and you're looking up to Glenn Keane and Don Bluth and these people who we were all kind of in the same age bracket at one time at Disney, and then went off to do whatever we went off to do. And you have a lot of folks today, new people, who are now the new young people who are doing beautiful work. So it's just a beautiful industry. It's so wonderful. So many extremely talented people, all of which have contributed to this great art form. So anyways, there you go. So anyway, I just thought I'd take a moment to speak that. And also too, the last time I talked about AI, how I don't think that AI, and Aaron Blaise, I believe, had mentioned this in one of his videos, that what you can do as an artist separates you from what a machine can do. And I would say that probably the most important thing I think that artists can do is to stop focusing so much on what they think AI can do or the jobs that it can take away from them, and focus instead on communicating how you feel as an artist. It's going to be what always will make you stand out in any situation is your uniqueness. God has given you a very unique voice. And those of you who have been lucky enough to find out what that voice is, just you put it out you put it out in the world that you want to put it out and say what you need to say, and it comes out. And every artist, whether that person is a visual artist, or a musician or an actor, whatever. It's a voice. So I say, forget about what the computer can do and just concentrate on what it is you do well and just do that and be happy. All right. Well, having said all of that, then once again, let's get back to this. So we've got enough drawings here. I'd say the only thing we want to do is we want to um, kind of ask ourselves: are we at that place where we can stop, or do we need to do anything else to solidify the poses and the continuation of the scene? I say the only thing I can see right here is I'd say at the very end of the scene, when we get down here to the end and he smiles, maybe we need to get into this. So, like, how do we get from here to here in terms of the that difference? So, what I'm going to say here, I think, is a gradual thing once again. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate after. I'm going to turn on my light here. And I think what I'm going to do is what's occurring to me is I'm going to change his mouth slowly into a smile here. So I'm going to start to close the mouth. So what I'm going to do, what I'm doing here is he's starting to close his mouth and then start to smile. So, and I think I'll do this again. I'll say duplicate after again, so that I don't have to trace the whole head. This is another of the beautiful things about the digital animation is that you don't have to, there's things you could save yourself some trouble. So here, I'll have him start to smile here. And that then, I could even have him half blink here. And have his chin come up just a little bit because he's closing his mouth. So that would probably affect his chin. Yeah, you see, he slowly closes his mouth instead of just boom right there. So what I would say here is, okay, that's 12 frames. I think what we can do here is we can speed this up. So let's make this 8 frames. Let's say we'll make this one 8 frames, and then maybe another frame in here. Yeah, let's see. Why don't we do this? We'll do this. We'll say we'll duplicate after again. All right. Then we'll get more into this, and then I think we'll just do a full blink here. Maybe, in fact, maybe even affect the eyebrows. So let's get the smile almost up to where it's gonna finally end. Okay. We'll have the eyes completely closed here in the blink, and this might be quicker because it's going to be a blink, maybe. And then have these eyebrows come down a bit. Let's see, to the more final position. I think in the final position, oh yeah, so he does have the ridges just above the eye. Yeah. All right, so let's see how that looks. Yeah, see, so it's a more gradual thing. Yeah. I could move his pupils of his eyes down because it looks like at the end there he's looking slightly down. So, like, for instance, if I get to, let's see, so, yeah, like in here, okay, so he's looking that way. So, what then if I were to take the pupils, right, and start to move them down to where they're going to eventually be? And same thing here. They're going to end up down here. So then his eyes are closed here. Yeah, so now they're where they should be. Let's see how that plays. Yeah. So you see what you're doing. You're always trying to connect your drawings. You're trying to connect the drawings with it, and you're looking for you're thinking the thought process. When I'm animating, I'm thinking thought process. He's slowly, he's looking, he sees something, and then he's reacting to it. But see, a reaction takes time. It's not just one drawing. It's going to be maybe a series of drawings. If he's going from one expression to another, how does he get to that expression, and what makes that movement believable? Well, it's how he gets there. And I was saying that everything doesn't move at the same rate. The eyes don't move at the same speed as the mouth, which doesn't move at the same speed as the hair. Everything is moving slightly differently. The hair would have to move faster, but the hair would have to follow through, wouldn't it? And also, too, like, if the hair is moving the way it is now, I mean, realistically, I could, if I wanted to, I could make that hair follow through and move a little bit over his face and back if I wanted to play with it a lot more. I don't think I will. I think I'll leave it kind of mild, but I'll do other scenes in the future where I'll show you that, you can do more with follow through on something. So you can see here all of the additional stuff. Yeah. So I'd say, looking at this now, I would say I think we've got the scene pretty much all of the drawings that we need to say the scene is fleshed out well enough that the only thing that we have left to do would be any in-betweens that would connect everything, right? That's what I would say. Yeah. Because what we're looking at is you're looking to connect in a way that you're looking to make the character feel like he's thinking, that he's alive. Now, let me just talk about timing a little bit. With timing, as I mentioned before, in the old days, when we did not have pencil test cameras or we didn't have computers or any of the things that we have today, the animators of the old days were, in my opinion, wizards, really, because they did not have the abilities that we have. They didn't have the technology that we have today, which allows us to immediately see something the way it would actually look. They had to time with a stopwatch or a metronome or whatever. They had to get to a place where they understood what 1/24th of a second actually looked like. There are 24 frames in 1 second of action. Now, right now, if we look at the scene, the way I have it now, there's 122 frames that make up this scene. So, roughly, what is that? That's about almost five. That's right around 5 seconds. Yeah, of action. So the animators, the animators or the directors or somebody would have to sit down with an exposure sheet, and they would have to, before they even animate anything, they would actually sit down and time out the scene. So then they'd have to act it out. You see, they'd have to act it out, and then they time themselves. Like, how long did it take me to do that, right? So that part was never too hard, knowing how long the scene was going to be. What the real problem was all the stuff in between, all of the stuff you're seeing here. Well, how many frames is he looking up, and how many, how many frames is his head turn, and all of that. And that was the elusive thing that most of us couldn't quite wrap our heads around, or at least, well, I'll speak for myself. I had a hard time wrapping my head around, like, what is that? How do you do that? Then I started to look at fragments of seconds. I started to look at, well, what is a half a second? Well, a half a second is 12 frames. Then I would break that down. Well, what's a quarter of a second? Well, that's 8 frames, And what I started to do is I started to break things down, and I started to imagine the time frame so that I could wrap my head around how long something would be on the screen. And then that would tell me that, say, a part of an action, I could tell how long it might actually register. I had this little thing I used to, and I don't know maybe somebody said this. I've studied under so many different people now. I'm trying to go back and remember who I heard what from. But I remember, I want to say it was Ben Washam. Ben Washam, who was one of the great Warner Brothers animators, used to have a animation class that he taught for free at his home. And I'm sure I have a lot of colleagues that can attest to this. We used to go to his house on Wednesdays after work, because we were such as students of animation. We go to his house and he'd tell us stories about his working at Warner Brothers and the Bugs Bunny cartoons and stuff he did with Chuck Jones. It was really wonderful stuff. Anyways, I think he may have been the one that said this to me, but I don't know. I don't remember. And if some of my colleague friends out there remember this, maybe you can correct me. But I didn't come up with it, but I must have heard it somewhere. 5 frames is a glimpse. So, for instance, like if I hold my hand up like this, ding, if I do that's 5 frames. That's 15 frames. So, 15, 5. Now, I used that. I would say 515, the 515 rule. That was something that I thought I came up with, but I have a feeling I got it from somebody. 5 frames is a glimpse, 15 frames is a pause. These were things that I used to kind of have in my head because I thought, well, that starts to kind of break it down for me. So that if something's on the screen for 5 frames, I know you only get a glimpse of it. If I want it to look like there's a process of thought there, I hold it for 15 frames. Now, they're just numbers, but that at least starts to kind of, it's like cutting the pie, If you've got a pie and the pie is, you cut it into 4 pieces, right? You got 4 pieces, right? So you got a quarter of a pie, You've half a pie, a quarter of a pie. Well, in a sense, when you're breaking down 24 frames, you're kind of doing the same thing. So, okay, well, 24 frames, well, you can divide that up a lot of ways, right? You could have 6 4-frame segments, or you could have 4 6-frame segments, or you could have 3 8-frame segments, or you could have 2 12-frame segments. You see what I mean? Segments. And so what that then does is it mentally starts to get you to think about what these little segments might look like. So, and back in those days, like I said, we didn't, back when I was coming up, the big technological advancement was the initial one was the video animation pencil test system. The guys of in the old days, they didn't have that. that they would have to shoot something on film, wait for it to be developed, and then look at it on the film. That might take a few hours, or it might also take a few weeks. When the video animation pencil test system came, that was instant. You shoot it, and then immediately you could see it. So I came in when that happened, and that was great. And I was just blown away by it, because when I initially started animating, I was teaching myself animation, and I was doing it by shooting it on film. And I had an old Super 8 camera that my father bought me, and I would shoot. And in fact, it didn't even have a single frame thing on it. I had to just kind of click the shutter and hope I got 2 frames or whatever. But the first time I ever saw any of my animation, I had to wait like a week or two for the film to be developed. I was just captivated. Once I saw it move, saw my drawings move, I thought, oh man, this is what I want to do with animation. Well, come out here to learn the stuff. I knew a little bit about it from reading in books, but I knew I was going to get my training here, which is what I did. Well, the video animation camera was like an intoxication for me, and I just like, oh man, I remember I was working for Ralph Bakshi. He literally had to throw me out of the studio at the end of the day because I wouldn't leave. I was so excited that I could animate and see it immediately. He just couldn't get me off of that freaking video camera. I'm sure he remembers that. I was in my 20s then. That was a great time for me. Anyways, and then of course I went on to Disney and got my real formal training as an animator. Okay, so now here we are today, and you can shoot your stuff, you can draw it and see it immediately, like we're looking at now. So I told you that story to kind of get you to this. Now we would flip our drawings a lot in the old days, and that was so that we could see it, kind of like what we're doing now. But the determination of timing now can be a little bit more instinctive just by looking at it. You can look at this and see where you might want something to be less frames or more frames. What I would suggest you do when you first animate something, don't worry about the timing. Just put each drawing on the screen for enough time for you to see that drawing. So in other words, you might have all your drawings could be on 4s or 6s or something. You don't need to try to figure out your timing right away, because you can flip it or look at it this way, and you can say, okay, well, I want that to be faster, or I want that to be slower, and you can just guess. Yeah, I mean, you can guess. Well, let's see, I'd like that to be a little bit longer, or I'd like that to be a little bit shorter, and you just add frames. Like for instance, let's say if I wanted his look to be longer over here, I could stop it, and I could say, well, okay, let's say he looks over here, blinks, he goes up there, and then he goes up to here. Now right here I have him looking for 5 frames. But what if I wanted that to be longer? Well, I can make that be a little bit longer. So right now it's 5 frames. What if I made it 8 frames? Now let's look at it and see how it looks. Yeah. So you see that 8 frames makes that look right there a little bit more intensive. See what I mean? Now what I've done by adding that extra few frames is I've given him a little bit more thought in that moment. Now it also means that I've added some more drawings, which may mean that I have more in-betweens to do. Okay, and then he, now when he moves through fast, I could make that faster or slower. So for instance, let's say like in here, he gets up to there, and let's say so he's moving through there. Now right now I have him moving on 2s. I think that's pretty, and actually that's pretty good. I'd say 2 frames I wouldn't want to go any slower than that. That feels right. But let's say I made it 1 frame for each one of those drawings. So if I made this 1 frame for each one of these drawings, then it's going to go a lot faster. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, you see how urgent that is? That don't. And you know what? Who's to say that that isn't good? That could be fine. I don't want to do that because I think I don't want him to move quite that fast. So I'm going to put it back on twos here. But this is what I mean about timing. Timing now can be instinctive based upon how you see it. In the old days, we had to guess. But today, we can be more purposeful. We can decide how many frames we want to hold something or move something. And then that then gives us much more flexibility. We can change our minds. We can give something more frames. And sometimes if something is moving faster, that might also affect how something else moves. Like, for instance, just when I just did that, because he moved so fast, maybe his hair would keep moving after he stopped. See what I mean? I mean, realistically, I could have had his hair move more after he stopped anyway. But if he's not moving so fast, then the hair could settle a little easier. So you see what I mean by the decision-making process changes. Okay, well, there you go. Well, I hope this has helped you. We're going to keep going. So the plan is I'll be doing this every day now until we get the scene done. So, I believe this is going to be part 4, I think. So I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow for part 4 of this. And, it's fun time drawing here. Let's animate. So, hey, y'all have a beautiful day. I will see you tomorrow. Thank God for your skills and abilities. Those of you who know you've been blessed by God for your drawing, thank Him. But, even if you haven't been blessed by God to draw, thank Him anyway, because you're blessed by God to have the life you have and the breath you have. Be thankful for all that you have, and appreciate it. And remember, as you know what I'm going to say, Jesus is Lord.